Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City, here is Steve Malzberg.
There's a worldwide war on Christianity. Christians are being attacked around the world, but you won't hear much about it on the evening news because the answer's not convenient. It doesn't fit the narrative we have been told about radical Islam. The president tries to gloss over who's attacking and killing Christians. The media describes the killings as sectarian. But the truth is, a worldwide war on Christians is being waged by a fanatical element of Islam.
All right, folks, and against that backdrop where Rand Paul was speaking the truth, we welcome in Charlotte Allen, the Weekly Standard contributor and author of Human Christ, The Search for the Historical Jesus. Charlotte, welcome.
Welcome yourself, Steve. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. And you wrote such a brilliant piece the other day about Christian persecution and specifically talking about Miriam Ibrahim and her death sentence and then her reprieve and then, of course, the again being arrested and unable to leave the country of Sudan when they claim she had false documentation. We're thankful she wasn't put to death. As you say, she was about to become a modern-day martyr. But this problem, this crisis of Christian persecution throughout the Middle East and parts of Africa is just going on unchecked and unspoken about by our own government and media.
That's absolutely right. As I wrote in my article, for example, in Sudan, which is, of course, where the imprisonment of Miriam Ibrahim took place, there had been at least a decade of genocidal mass slaughters of Christians during the 1990s that the mainstream media paid no attention to whatsoever. And when somebody might point that out, they would say, well, Christians are the world's majority religion, so basically who cares? And that seemed to be the attitude. We paid no attention to Sudan until Darfur in the early 2000s, when suddenly the Muslims of Sudan were killing other Muslims in Darfur, and then lots of outrage, but no outrage whatsoever at the decade of slaughter of Christians that had preceded that.
You could go...
Essentially,
yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Essentially, the Miriam Ibrahim case kind of springs for that. It's the same Sharia law that's been in existence since 1989 in Sudan, and that prompted the earlier massacres. And finally, the secession of South Sudan, which is mostly Christian, from Sudan itself. But obviously, that hasn't solved the problem of Christians who happen to be in Sudan itself. They're still engendering an outrageous persecution. The whole idea of being sentenced to death for a faith that was the faith of one's childhood is absolutely appalling. And even with Miriam Ibrahim, the media hasn't paid a whole lot of attention.
No, they really haven't. And of course, you know, it goes way beyond Sudan, Charlotte, as you well know, and as I alluded to. And you could look at the dwindling number of Christians throughout the Middle East, and traditionally, you know, havens where Christians felt comfortable, where Christians wanted to live because of either historical circumstances and significance or religious significance and circumstances. And now they're being driven out. If they're lucky, they're being driven out. In many cases, they're being slaughtered. Churches are being bombed. It's going on all over the parts of the world. And again, how do you reconcile, or how do you explain the silence? I mean, you know, today, tragically, there's a dead Palestinian teenager, and we don't know who did it, although the media and our administration would have it blamed on Israeli settlers already, even though we have no idea what happened. But, you know, that's dominating the news today. Yet, you know, how many Christians were slaughtered today in parts of the world, and you're never going to hear about any of them.
That's absolutely right. For example, in Syria, there's been a constant burning of churches, murdering of priests and other clergy people, driving Christians out of Syria by the Al-Qaeda and its allies among the Syrian rebels. But we're not supporting. Instead, we have raised no protest whatsoever, as far as I can tell, I think the reason is that simply that our secular society is kind of conditioned to believing or believes that Christians are the fanatics. They're the oppressors. They're the enslavers. When actually all of the reverse is true. And so we just haven't done a thing. We haven't said a thing about Syria's Christians. Not a thing about this huge burning of Coptic churches in Egypt, where Copts have lived since at least the 1st or 2nd century, since the time of Christ. Christians in Iraq, ancient communities that have existed since Christianity's very first centuries, are basically being obliterated, and we're just saying nothing. For example, as I pointed out in my article, the kidnapping of those Nigerian schoolgirls. Well, there was a lot of shock and horror at that, but again, the story wasn't played for what it really was. What most of those schoolgirls were Christians. The kidnapping took place in a Christian part of Nigeria. The Boko Haram, the kidnappers, are a virulent jihadist Islamic group. Their beef wasn't that girls were being educated as Michelle Obama and others.
I'm so glad, Charlotte. I'm so glad you point that out, because not only did she misrepresent it as just an issue about girls being educated, but she left out the Christian aspect altogether. She left out the fact that they slit the throats and burned to death and shot to death 40 boys at a boarding school just a few months earlier. That they rampage villages and kill people, anyone that gets in their way or they don't agree with. So. Congratulations for being there with me for taking Michelle Obama to task for totally misrepresenting Boko Haram. And finally, I'm not here, and we have a minute, but I'm not here to go after the Christian community. I'm Jewish, and nobody does more on this issue than me on show after show. But where is the Christian community? Where is the Catholic Church? Where are these leaders all over the world speaking out en masse about this?
Yeah, there have been a few voices, but really not many. And I think that Christians feel cowed by secular society. They look at eras when there was Christian persecution of minority groups. They feel guilty about that. They want to be.
Are you telling me that Christians have some Jewish guilt, Charlotte? Oh, my God. You know what? That's a good way to end it. Charlotte, listen, thank you. We'll have you back. Great work. Keep it up, and thanks for being with us.
Okay, it was really great being with you, too, and best of luck.
Thank you. Charlotte Allen, ladies and gentlemen, Weekly Standard contributor, author of Human Christ, The Search for the Historical Jesus, and a great piece on the persecution of Christians and Miriam Ibrahim. All right, we're coming back, folks, with more of the Steve Malzberg Show, and you are not going to want to miss it, I promise.